Alright, now it's time to break down this wonderful book that we have just summarized, which is Slaughterhouse-5, also known as the Children's Crusade. So let's get down to it. Billy Pilgrim. I believe that throughout this story, Billy really, the stories of the Tralfamadorians and of space and the zoo, they didn't happen. That was his way of coping with the horrors and everything and the guilt that he felt after World War II, which makes perfect sense. You can see there's many parallels between what happened to him in the POW camp and during the war, and once he was taken to Tralfamador, as he says. When he's first taken to the camp, he's stripped down and he feels emasculated, and finally, when he's taken to the Tralfamadorian Zoo, he has to strip down, but he feels confident in himself, and he says, I was able to enjoy my body for the very first time. And even then, he was confined to a slaughterhouse during the war. He was taken to a zoo. And even further than that, he was given the woman's coat and humiliated, and he felt strong and virile and all these other things at the zoo because he was one of a kind. They had never seen him, and they had no way of identifying that he was an odd and gangly-looking human being. They thought he was a perfect specimen. And his marriage with Valencia is evidence of that, too. His marriage to Valencia, he didn't enjoy her very much. He thought she was ugly and unattractive, and then once he's there, he becomes infatuated with a porn star who falls in love with him, essentially. And he even quotes himself after having finally been able to join his body. He quotes himself, and he possessed a tremendous wang, the famous quote. And you can see that it's like the ultimate prisoner of war experience. He was taken somewhere, stripped down. The people there think he's perfect. They get to look at him naked all the time. He's given a beautiful young woman all to himself, and he's instantly able to make a baby. I wouldn't complain. Looking at it deeper than that, all the appearance of the Tralfamadorians themselves are shaped like toilet plungers with hands and one eye. Now, a very different way to think about it is, so all the stuff that happened is a blockage in Billy. All the stuff that he saw while he was overseas in World War II, it's a blockage. Toilet plungers unblock toilets. So the Tralfamadorians are a way of unblocking and releasing all the guilt and the grief and the dread that Billy feels after coming back from World War II, which makes perfect sense. I mean, before the war, he was a well-studied man. He was smart. And he's in the business of helping other people. Once he was finally in the war, he was a chaplain's assistant, never harmed a person. Once he left the war, he was a successful optometrist, helped people. And then, further than that, he was a father and helped raise a family. So you can see how he was guilty for, one, the bombings of Dresden and the Battle of the Bulge, having survived everything when all those people died, so it goes. And afterwards, after that, being allied with the people who were responsible for the bombing of Dresden and all those deaths. And even further than that, after the war, being prosperous and having money afterwards, having prospered from the war. And so all that combined, all the guilt and the grief and the post-traumatic stress that he was feeling after surviving those horrific things just built up and built up and built up. He needed a way out. And he didn't fabricate it himself for any attention, I don't think. That was just his way of coping with it. And the parallels there didn't make it very evident that his post-traumatic stress was a very real thing, and that was his way of coping with it. And like I said, the Tralfamadorians, they're shaped like plungers. They unblock toilets. The toilet is Billy Pilgrim. He needs to be unblocked. And I mean that in the most literal, or not literal, the most figurative way I can. He's stopped up with all that emotion and he needs to clear it out. And looking at it, again, from a more literal standpoint, one can say that Billy Pilgrim, his story of Tralfamador and all that, is simply just added in by Kurt Vonnegut to, give the story a little more entertainment factor, a little more lift, to boost its readability, so to speak, open it to a wider audience of people. I honestly believe that Kurt Vonnegut himself has these issues and has to cope with it with some sort of way, and Billy's PTSD is evident as more and more as the story progresses. You can see it once he's at his 18th wedding anniversary with his wife and his family and all the different optometrists, when he has the breakdown because of the barbershop quartet reminding him of the war again and again. You could see it starting there. And even then, once the parallels started drawing with his time in the war and then his time in outer space, you could start to see it again and again. And their description of time and how everything is cemented and you can't change it no matter what you do, it really, that would also help to release some guilt that he could have felt also, because everything that happened as far as him surviving and everything like that, he had nothing to do with it. It was just the way it was meant to be. Like, one of the parallels that could be drawn from that is how in the POW camps, German guards or prison guards wouldn't explain why they would beat one prisoner but not another. The Tralfamadorians never explained to him why they chose him and not another human being. It's all parallel. It's all right there next to each other, and you can see it as you read the book. Now, breaking it down from a more literal standpoint, the literature itself, rather than the different ideas and the thought processes and things like that, the story is extremely well written. It's a little hard to follow, but it's a short book, and it forces you to pay close attention to what you're reading and what you're seeing, and to think very clearly. And after I've read it twice now, so after seeing it, you can see there's a slow plot progression with the other stuff added in. And Vonnegut, like I explained it earlier in my summaries, you can see every time there's a big setting change, that's when the next chunk of the story is coming, the middle. They're changing locations again, that's the end. And the part that he keeps flashing back to for the most period of time, that's where you are in the story. Because essentially what Vonnegut says in the beginning of the story, he wanted to write about the bombings of Dresden. That's how you know the climax is going to be the bombing of Dresden. And so we start out, he's behind enemy lines after the Battle of the Bulge. We slowly move, he does his flashing there and there. Okay, we stop. The beginning of the story is now over. They're about to change location. They're now at the prisoner of war camp. So then they're there. He's flashing. We're learning more about him. And then we stop. They're about to go to Dresden. That's the beginning of the end. So they're in Dresden. He's still doing his flashing, and then the climax. The climax is when the bombing of Dresden finally happens, because that is what Vonnegut wanted to write the story about to begin with. The bombing of Dresden happens, then that's when we have the end. The end is when he's sitting there, and we're finally learning that about the aftermath of that, all the horrors that were there. And he ends it on a bit of an uplifting note. Billy Pilgrim was finally free from the war. He was finally able to leave those horrors and go home. And he ends it with the bird sound. And we associate birds with peace and freedom and all the time. And I think that's why he did that. And the way that the Tralfamadorians described the way their literature is written, they said it's a collection of random messages and moments, and when it's all pieced together, it creates a beautiful image of life. And that's essentially what this book does. It takes the random flashes of memory from all over the place in Billy Pilgrim's life and puts them together, and we get a beautiful picture of we're humans, we're here together, why are we trying to kill each other? And it's an anti-war book, and that's the message he was trying to convey the entire time, that Billy sees that people go to great lengths to hurt each other, but he asks the Tralfamadorians themselves, why can't we just live peacefully? And because in his lifetime he never really found that answer, the way the Tralfamadorians, which is his parallel to help release things, the way they cope with that is they say, well, we know when the universe is ending anyway, so it doesn't matter to live in peace. He said, on Earth, your violence has nothing to do with the ending of the universe and the ending of everything. So why even bother? Just let it happen anyway. And that's his way of coping with it. You can see everything. For every question he had, there was some sort of answer that would help him release even more and more. And that's what he needed, and that's what this was. It was a result of the PTSD and everything that had happened to him, all the horrors, because you could see very easily he didn't have an easy life, having to go through the war and everything that he saw.